Hey everyone, welcome back. So in today's video we're starting the human gas exchange system, which is generally called as the human respiratory system. So let's begin. Imagine a white man again. So you're going to find the nostrils, which are also known as the external nares. From the nostrils you can see the cavity on the inside of the nose is the nasal cavity, which is separated from the buccal cavity just by your palate. Inside the nasal cavity, you're going to find nasal hair. On the microscopic level, you're going to find goblet cells, which are also known as the mucus gland, and ciliated epithelium. We're going to talk about these structures in more detail shortly. When we go further, the pharynx is the region which is where the thoracic gland is present, and then right from the pharynx you get two tubes. Our concern is trachea, which is known as the windpipe. Another tube would be the esophagus that we have already talked about. The trachea got cartilage rings right around it, which is a structure which controls the shape of the trachea. Then inside the thoracic cavity you got a rib cage, which is a set of bones. So the rib cage is right there, which protects your lungs and obviously your heart. We got two lungs, and these lungs are covered by a membrane known as the pleural membrane. Inside the lungs there is a microscopic structure known as the alveoli. That is something we'll talk about in the upcoming videos. And then you can see that there is a muscular wall right underneath the lungs, which is known as the diaphragm. The diaphragm is the muscular plate which separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity, which has your digestive gland systems. On the rib cage, there's a set of muscles known as the intercostal muscles, which has two counterparts known as the external intercostals and internal intercostal muscles. Then when we look at overall structure, we can see the rib cage, the lungs, this all constitutes your thoracic cavity. And everything below the diaphragm would have been your abdominal cavity. This is where your important digestive system lies. Let's quickly talk about the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity has this nasal hair which are there to prevent dust particles from entering. So nasal hair, they allow to trap dust particles. Why do we need that? So to clear the air and to prevent damage and you can say infections, because dust particle obviously has pathogens on its surface. Another thing you can see are those goblet cells, which are also known as the mucus glands. These mucus glands have a good number of endoplasmic reticulum because they make proteins. And then there's this other cells known as the ciliated epithelium, which has eyelashes like cilia on it. So let's quickly talk about their purpose. When we talk about the mucus glands, or you can say the goblet cells, what's their purpose? So let's quickly write it down because this is something they ask normally in paper 2. They produce mucus, which is a combination of mucin. Mucin is actually a glycoprotein. So produce mucus, which is a combination of mucin, glycoprotein and water. So it's a sticky substance. It's a sticky substance that traps pathogens on it. So the bacteria actually get trapped on the sticky mucus. And then later we will engulf the mucus, and then in stomach they are killed. Ciliated epithelium is another set of cells on the surface of the nasal cavity. So ciliated epithelium cells have the cilia that propel and move the mucus away to prevent the blocking. Because if the cilia are damaged, which is something that happens for very frequent smokers, so mucus is not removed and mucus is then, staying there, blocking the overall system. Let's quickly talk about the trachea. This is your trachea, and then trachea bifurcates into two bronchi. Bronchi is a plural, bronchus is singular. The region where they separate or bifurcate is known as carina. Each bronchus goes into a lung, which further divides into many bronchioles. It's very much like saying artery breaks into arterioles, so the wordplay is still similar. This is the lumen, which is the center, which is the open area from where the air passes, and then there are cartilage rings. So trachea has cartilage rings, and this is something you talk about in A levels, that bronchus has cartilage plates. So cartilage rings, they prevent the trachea from collapsing. If you think about physics, when there is no air in the trachea, it might collapse because of the air pressure. So the trachea is prevented from collapsing by the cartilage when the air is expelled out, because the air pressure would have made the trachea to collapse, and we can't afford that. So because of the external air pressure, there's this fear of collapse, and that is why the cartilage rings help us. Bronchi have those cartilage plates, which means they're not very regular in shape, but at least they serve the same purpose. When we look at the transverse section of trachea, you can see this diagram. So the inside is the lumen. This is the cut section. So the inside is the lumen from where the air passes. What about the other structures? So we got these smooth muscles around the trachea, which control the overall lumen. Muscles can contract and relax. You can see this dark blue region, which is the cartilage. So the cartilage is made up of cells known as chondrocytes. So chondrocytes, chondrio means cartilage, cyte means cells, so cartilage cells. Smooth muscles maintain the cross-sectional area of your trachea or bronchi or whatever. Then when we further talk about the insides, you can see this pink line is actually the ciliated epithelium, which has a cilia on it, and we know the purpose cilia serves. It helps in propelling the mucus out, so there's no blockage. These rings, do you see? These are, this layer basically, submucosa, has those blood vessels. Now let's quickly talk about the lungs. When we talk about the lungs and the alveoli, we have got two lungs, we know that. The left lung has 3 lobes, the right lung has 2 lobes. You don't have to memorize this fact. The right, left, you can see. And then these lobes you see over here, there are lobes divided into the lungs, but this serves no specific purpose, so you don't have to memorize it based on what we are doing right now. The bronchi, which goes into each lung, divides further into multiple bronchioles, and each bronchiole further divides into many bronchioles. In the middle, you can see the heart is right there. So the rib cage is protecting the heart and the lungs. There are so many alveoli where each bronchiole ends, and alveoli is the microscopic air sac where actually gaseous exchange occurs. So in the next video, we'll talk about how the alveoli serves the purpose. Stay tuned, guys. Thanks.